Hey, we are Hardly Focused, part of the Solid Listen Podcast Network. Jack Gill, Nate Fillers, Zach Ward. Daniel Vitale joins us here on the podcast, author of Orphans of Canland. He is he's based out of Los Angeles. He's a recipient of a Lane Fellowship from Amherst College. Also, an NCAA goalie. And Daniel, you now train goalies in Los Angeles. And I want to ask you about this later on in the interview, but your wife also writes for the Bravo Network. Is that correct?
She's a TV writer. She's had stuff on TV Land. Her current show is on Netflix. Younger, the bold type, now glamorous. I suspect we'll get into writer's strike, maybe AI writers talk, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
We have been talking about that a lot lately, so I figured you would probably have some pretty good opinions on that.
I don't like it. We can get into it. I don't like it.
I mean, Fair. Who knows? Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thanks so much for having me. The intro is apt. I coached a goalie camp today, so the voice is worn, but that's what I do. That's
nice.
That's how we keep the LA mortgage going.
Nice. What brought you out to Los Angeles from Massachusetts?
So I moved out at first because I thought that I was going to be a screenwriter. In college, I majored in history, which at a liberal arts school is just like, writing and Googling. So it's like, a writing research major, kind of led me into this weird place of studying pop film depictions of the Vietnam War, which
interesting.
So like Oliver Stone films, the Kubrick films, and how the perception of the war changed as the films evolved and how whatever those reflected each other. But that made me be, okay, there's like something to say with screenplays and films, like that moment where you're like, wow, movies are more than just like Darren Aronofsky being trippy, whatever. So I moved out to LA for a summer just to kind of try it. And then my senior year of college started writing screenplays. I wrote an animated thing and storyboarded it. And that's way more work than I was capable of doing, way more technical than I ever had the patience for. But it got me out here. Went to Disneyland one day. I was like, I got to tell stories. This seems like a good place to do it. And then I worked out here. My first year I spent in TV. I was I was Dana Gould's assistant.
Wow!
I'll just pick up that name I just dropped. But it was great. It was great to work with him, and I realized that it was not what I wanted to do. And so there was a moment after I graduated. I lived around Amherst for a little while, and wrote this screenplay about myself. I think that's where most writers start, is just writing something totally turgid and bloated about themselves. And I brought it to a table read, and a table read of a screenplay, they say the rule is like a minute a page. So if you're rolling in with like a long script and it's like 120 pages, it shouldn't take more than 2 hours. And 4 hours later, we were still reading this movie that I had written. And they're like, oh my God, this is the worst. This is as bad as it could go. Everybody here is bored. This is like a screenwriters group, and I've just like totally monopolized it, and it's terrible. And I know that it's terrible. I went back to my apartment, and I don't even think I cried. I don't think I was like capable of it. I think I was just like, this is not for me. Instead, I kind of just figured out maybe I should write prose instead. And in exploring the novel form, felt much more comfortable than I ever was with the screenplay form. I mean, the screenplay form is so rigid. There are so many rules to it. I felt so confined by it. And I think it is, for me, way harder than writing fiction. The scenes have to be a certain amount of time, and then there's the act breaks and the cut. You got to use the cut to your advantage. I didn't know what sort of language I was allowed to use in action lines. So it was like, I got to switch gears here. But I had already moved out here. I had an apartment, I had a job. And so I just sort of stayed. There's a lot that I love about living out here. There's reasons to stay. There's a reason that 10 million people live here.
Oh so. If I could, I would absolutely live out there. Yeah, I absolutely would. Zach, I'll throw it to you in a second. I'm just curious with writing a screenplay. You mentioned 1 minute per page. When you're writing, is there like a method to trying to nail it down? So like you go through the page and it takes you a minute.
When I was trying to write scripts, movies, TV shows, whatever it was, my thing was kind of read it back. I had to read it out loud. And there's sometimes where my fiction I'll read aloud for flow, but with scripts I was more reading aloud for timing, which when you're reading fiction you don't have to worry about. There's not a beat. There's not a moment of silence. It's everything is a word. I didn't have that sort of temporal sense with the screenplay form. I hadn't been around it enough. I wasn't part of the theater in high school. I wasn't an actor until I took an acting class, my token acting class, you know what I'm saying? Like in LA, but, it wasn't like I timed myself when writing, but when reading it aloud, I was certainly like, how is this going to sound when it comes through an actor's mouth? Again, I didn't have a sense of it, so I dropped it.
Okay, cool, man. Zach, go ahead.
So like, I think you touch on something very interesting here for me. Like, I'm just thinking that the medium that you need to be able to like flex that part of your brain, I think is very important. And it sounds like you kind of hit that wall of what's formulaic with the the writing industry, because like it's weird to like say that actually out loud, that there's like a writing industry, but like I can only imagine like what that like felt like, because like it just, I don't know, there's a couple things that you said that means, yeah, this kind of feels like an existential like wall that you just get punched in the face with, and you're like, okay, wow, that's not how my brain works. That's pretty much what it sounds like your experience was. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't uncommon for me to find myself in a room with people who I felt were judging my writing ability before they read anything. And like, that's fine. That's kind of how every young professional probably feels. Oh no, am I not good enough? These people are so experienced. These producers have done so much. But there is a TV writing industry before it even gets to the screen or to set. How these things get written and chopped up and developed, and why they get turned down, and why people get paid a ton of money for stuff that you'll never see or even hear about. It's not any different really with publishing, I've found. And long story short, I had to independently publish my book. It's, it has the facade of a small publisher, and I've pitched it to media outlets and bookstores as being from a small publisher because of the indie stigma. But it is that, it's an industry where, man, I had the numbers on it. I could pull them up, but like Colleen Hoover sold like sold like 90% of all fiction that sold last year. What is it called?
Wow.
You know what I'm talking about? It Starts With Us, It Ends With Us, the romance writer. And I was
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, like there are so few people who get that chance, who stand a chance, who, have something that they want read and that they've put time into. And the industry just sucks. Like it's a game like any other.
It's very volatile.
Yeah. And sort of like the numbers are king, if it's not gonna win with the numbers that they already have and know, there are testers and marketers, and it's no different from any other product, really.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a lot too because I was actually watching a show on Netflix this weekend, which I thought was actually a really cool, inventive idea. So I knew that it was definitely canceled. I didn't even bother looking it up. I'm sure it's canceled at this point, but it was like I liked it because it was a contest of food scientists, and they were trying to recreate like snacks. And like I watched like the first episode, I thought it was like, this is really cool. I like that. Like the first phase basically is like they have a group of food scientists. They pick them basically out of a hat, but they use like a vending machine. And then they have them try and recreate a random snack. And then after they try to recreate it, they say, all right, now do a snack in this vein, and like, but with your specialties. And I thought that's really cool because honestly, food science is really interesting. But I find it so poignant that like all of these streaming services, especially since they're not like cable, it's a lot different. So they pull the plug a lot more aggressively, I've noticed over the years, because they can't monetize it past a certain point, then like they just pull it unceremoniously, and they find it's easier just to keep mass producing something else rather than like keep something consistent and like grow it with an actual fan base.
Yeah, I think the flip side, you're 100% right, and also they develop a lot more. They've got more money to make more shows. They don't have to sell the ad space. Theoretically, there is no time limit. There are no time slots on Netflix. You can watch anything whenever. So they can make more stuff. It's sort of a limitless space in a way, I think. And I was listening to something about just how it changed so fast, and too many people have said too much about it. I don't know enough. I don't really need to get into it. There'd be nothing that I could say that someone else hasn't said, but it is a much more productive world, and it's a lot more ruthless too. There's no Big Bang Theory where it's just going to run for 15 seasons and people are going to keep showing up to it. The best shows now are going to run for like 5.
Yeah.
That's like the most.
Yeah.
I feel like writers too are also trying to find that sweet spot, kind of like with Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, for example, where they're trying to find the point to end it, and knowing there's going to be people out there saying, no, keep it going for another season, for another 2 seasons. And I just feel like very rarely do you find a show and find a set of writers who are like, no, we know exactly when it's going to end. That's when it's over. And it's one of those things you just kind of have to sit back and really think about it after the fact, where you're like, that was right. That it ended at the right time. Like, I don't want anything more, but it also didn't end too early.
Well, those guys are also gig workers. Like even the most successful writers, if the networks say, hey, you're getting another season, they're going to take that next season. Like, cause where's your next job coming from? There's my next job. So if we felt like that last one could have been the end, we would have liked to only have one more season. Then the network says, hey, ratings are great. We're getting a ton of viewers. Take another one, and we're going to give you more money to make it. Your budget's bumped. They're gonna take it. And so, I guess these shows maybe they aren't ever writing to an end. They're always leaving something open. Like, on Ozark, I think they were very lucky to be able to be like, no, this is when it ends. And that's rare. That's really, really rare. I mean, who has that much power to be able to be like, this is the last season. I decline the job next year.
I guess as a writer, like, how do you feel about instances where there's shows like Game of Thrones that are based off, a book series, but then you get to a point where you have now, like, the book series isn't finished, right? And now you have to come up with material based off of loose notes, but otherwise you're trying to go off a source that doesn't really exist. I mean, like, that's... I kind of feel like the Game of Thrones people were just sort of freewheeling it once we got into that final season.
Which on my first date with my wife, she told me not to watch. I'd seen all of them up until that, and I was like, "Oh wait, no, I haven't seen the last one yet." She was like, "Do not watch it.
It's garbage."
Those two went on a boat and out into the middle of the ocean and had probably no Wi-Fi because they didn't want to know what everybody else was saying about it. But yeah, I kind of think it's cool to have a source material, an unfinished source material, because with a good show, with a Thrones-like show, there are enough differences. I think, I haven't read the books. This is what I hear. There are enough differences where the show lives on its own, and the show has its own audience and its own appeal. It's not not everybody who watches it has read it and wants to read it. Some people just, like the action high fantasy TV show for an hour a week rather than the fully immersed reading experience. But I like it. I think it's cool. It takes on a life of its own, and then the author can do their own thing separate from that, and they sort of live in. I'm not precious about my work. If someone would adapt it, I would love it and kind of be like, let's see your take.
We're talking with Dan Vitale. He wrote Orphans of Canland. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, guessing pretty much wherever you can get books, right?
Indeed, yep.
And we can also find you at Daniel Vitale. That's Vitale, danielvitale.com. Zach, you had some questions about inspiration.
Yeah, because I just... recall you saying earlier that you kind of found prose sort of as a medium, and I found, like, when I first started reading Orphans of Canland, that the way that you have the voice of the story is just very different. Like, I like it. It's very... I've been struggling to find a way to describe it, but I like that, I kind of want to understand more about what led you to even get the idea for this, and kind of where it all branched out from.
Oh yeah, sure. The short answer is 3 abandoned novels that I hope never see the light of day. They've been locked away. They'll never come out.
True artist turmoil, I understand.
Yeah, you're not really a writer unless you have a garbage can just full of things that you never want anyone to see.
Yeah, well, but they're so good, it's the story came from a character from a previous piece who came from a piece before that, and sort of got a little younger and a little more naive as he went through. This is Tristan, the main character, but whose scope, he was too aware in all the other stories, and they were in different settings and different times with different characters, a different journey. But the voice that I was writing from, he was too aware. And as a writer, when there's no sense of discovery or surprise when I'm working, it's kind of over, you're why bother? You're kind of done. If you're bored writing the thing, it's like me at that table read. I'm like, oh God, this is not going well. this, something's got to change. So that character followed me on a road trip I took in the spring of 2019. I drove from LA to Vancouver and back down. I took 3 weeks away. I was in an artistic rut. I was taking an acting class, as I mentioned at the time. And it just it wasn't for me. I was in this scene. I didn't want to get divorced on stage twice a week. Like, it was, not my artistic the pursuit that I needed. So I got away. I drove up to Vancouver, and I stopped on the way in Tahoe and San Francisco and Ashland, Oregon, and Portland and Seattle and the rainforests in British Columbia.
Nice.
I was like, holy shit, like, this is fucking crazy. This is the most beautiful part of the world that I had known until then, and maybe still have known. And I think I didn't realize. I went to school in Massachusetts. I grew up kind of like in the woods of New York. It's Westchester, but it's basically raised woods. It's like a suburb in the middle of the woods by the creek, whatever. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I've kind of been starved of nature like this, living in Southern California without even realizing it. And now that I've come back, since coming back here, I've actually been more aware of where I can find nature here, which is great. But being surrounded by it the way that I was on that trip, I had that question that I think a lot of us are having, which is, what if this goes away? What does life look like for us all if it doesn't snow this year, and then it doesn't rain, and then it burns, and then not what does the apocalypse look like, but because you could say we're in it right now. Well, what's the end of the world going to be? It's going to be really slow and painful and, hidden in a lot of ways. But then when there's that undeniable moment, everyone kind of agrees. There's a passage in the book. I think it's Tristan's brother who says, we're all having PTSD together right now. Everybody. We all had a traumatic near-death experience at the same time. Yeah. How do we rebuild? Where do we go from there? What does the world look like? What are the rules? Who makes the rules? And who benefits from those rules, and who gets fucked? And where does this kid fit into it? He's a medical marvel. He shouldn't have lived at birth. He is born with this congenital condition where he can't feel physical pain. So his brain doesn't have developed stress centers. He doesn't know when he's in danger. He doesn't really know when other people are sad or stressed. And I was like, okay, in this undeniably shit world, like, this all really went bad. What does a kid who doesn't know how bad it is for everybody else do, think, feel? How does he learn about it? How does he talk to his mom about this stuff? And obviously he learns. If he didn't learn, there would be no book. But that's kind of where it started. It's a long answer, but that's where it came from.
That is so cool because I haven't really got a chance to sit down and fully finish it yet, but I like that the first full chapter really left an impression on me of I felt hazy. Yeah. I felt I was kind of not really I was perceiving things in kind of a daze as I was reading through his perspective, as things just kind of popping into existence as an idea of something, rather than things being in a tight formulaic box of this is this right now and this is why we do this right now. It just, everything feels it didn't have as many borders with how he felt about things. And I really like how you did that, because I don't know, I really feel like those first couple like pages really kind of grab you of just like this is unique, like this is a unique perspective, and like I definitely find like I always kind of look in my media. I like look for that feeling of like I kind of, even if I kind of know what's going to happen next, like I like not knowing what's going to happen next. Like I'd like when I like, you know, I'm watching something and it is a journey. It is whimsical. It is taking me somewhere and immersing me in something that like I haven't, you know, experienced before. And like we've talked before about like, you know, my opinions on video games and immersion and like the, you know, especially like the whole like the indie genre with video games when it comes to that for art pieces is just like crazy. Like the art games out there right now are just like the things that you can do in certain games are just amazing.
Yeah.
But like I love how this, I don't know, I really like the how you put it together. It just like it makes it very unique, and I think that's like I think what you are hoping for when you create like a body of work like that. So like, you know, definitely good job.
Are you listening, everybody? I think that is a process that happened to me while writing it, and with the book I'm working on right now has happened here and there too. And then it's about refining that stuff so that it can you know, it so that it can be a book and not like a journal. Which is funny because a lot of the stuff in Orphans of Camland is Tristan's journal, and that's intentional. I was writing a first person narrative in the present tense from a kid who has a very limited emotional toolbox. And I was like, this is not only too hard for me, but it's not really fair to the reader. So how can we put a little bit of perspective and sensibility into the narrative so that it's not, and then I went here and then I said this and then my mom said this and then I did this. It's just like there's no, you know, and then. So the journal puts us into the past a little bit and is a more reflective part of the book. And then when we do get into that present tense, the pace is a little more propulsive, and you know, and the departures from his present moments, I feel when I was writing it, are a little scarier. It's like, oh no, what's happening to Tristan when he should be paying attention? Because we know that, you know, a bug bite might not just be a bug bite when he can't feel physical pain. It could be an infection. He could get his arm amputated. Like, oh my God, this sense of, you know, who's looking after this kid. And so, Zach, I think that like that sense of, you know, almost like walking into the circus for the first time and being like, look at all this stuff going on. It's almost like, you know, I'm not drawing the comparison myself. I would never, but I think it's The Sound and the Fury. Like, you know, Faulkner has this in that first chapter, bouncing from one time to another, and the italics tell you kind of when you're changing time. But I think it's Ben is the character, maybe Benny is, it's not linear. He's going from memory to thing that's happening now. And, you know, the story isn't about what's happening. It's about who's this person that's experiencing this stuff, and how can we feel like we've welcomed Tristan into our lives as we read this, and like we're living alongside with him. That's my favorite stuff to read and to watch and to play, is when you have a sense of who the people are. You know, you can write a story that'll be a really smart and clever piece about, you know, global warming and climate change and capitalism, and it might as well be a Huffington Post article, but who are the people who are living through this world? You know, how can we relate to, understand, disagree with this person? That's why he's, you know, perceiving so much, I think, you know.
Nate, you are a writer, or an aspiring writer.
Yes, that's true. Also, I just want to say, like, I'm sorry, like, for the first like 20 minutes of this whole thing, somebody decided to shoot fireworks like right outside of my window, like literally right next to my window, like just explosions. So I missed everything that you guys were talking about. So my first question is, what was your inspiration? No, I'm just kidding.
They were celebrating the fact that we have Dan on the show with us.
Right.
Yeah. So I just started picking up writing. I'm not really like, I don't really know anything about it. I just kind of do it. I was just curious if, like, I know it's not glamorous, but I was wondering if you could like take us through some of, like, you know, the working out the problems, or like, you know, like what you did for like writer's block, or like how your process went, like how did you know when it was done, like stuff like that.
Well, I guess I could show you my desk, but I don't know you guys that well yet. So I think you say you don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about it. It's just this chair and this surface, and you know, I've got my manuscript here with some notes and some books that I turn to in my time of need.
Right.
You know, it's I don't think of it as guesswork so much as just making myself available to whatever wants to happen, to whatever wants to be written. And if it's, you know, 200 words in a day, that's okay. And if it's 800 words or 1200 words, oh my God. And then, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to realize that those 1200 words might have been a little bit of a waste of time, and I'm going to have to redo it. And it's just that kind of deal over and over and over again. You know, almost like needing to go, you know, am I done yet? Am I done yet? I don't know. No, but when does it feel right in my hand? When is it stretchy enough, but it's not going to break apart? And it's just, you know, we did it a little bit in the intro. I've played goalie my whole life. In hockey, and I don't know that it's that different from getting on the ice, knowing you're going to get scored on, knowing you're going to fail. Writing in a way is a little bit safer because it doesn't go on a scoreboard. It's not like everybody can see how many times you messed up. Mm-hmm. But then again, you know, there's always Goodreads and 1-star reviews, so whatever. But if I can just sit down knowing, you know what, today might not go great, but also I might find a shiny nugget in here, then that makes the whole day worth it. And it's something that can move the story wherever it needs to go. And my favorite writers kind of put it this way. George Saunders talks about it like this. I think Alice McDermott says something along these lines. If I can be of service to the story and just accept that this one is what wants to be told, and the only way it's going to be told is if I type it out and then revise it, and trust the revision process, especially with writer's block. I don't know what needs to happen. I don't know. I'm locked up. Can I still show up, make something, and then kind of search for it in the editing process and the revision process? That's how stuff then comes to the surface, but it's never clear.
That's awesome. That's so much better of an answer than just go for a walk. That's what everybody says. That's what
I've got my little tricks, you know, for that happen to work for me.
Of course.
Peanut butter cups help.
There you go, Nate.
Yeah, ice cream for me.
A walk, certainly. Just a minute in the garden. Ashley loves to garden, and the house looks amazing right now. So just like, you know, I found something the other day, actually, while looking at the hydrangeas, and I was like, that's it. That goes in the novel. This is the one I'm working on right now. It's like, why is this woman's mom getting so mad at her? Oh, because she spat on the hydrangea. Okay, right. Let's go in. And then what's the other one? Music. I'm always writing with headphones on. And if I have trouble getting in a mode, accessing the emotional tenor that it feels like the scene requires, I'll listen to Japanese screamo. There's this band called Envy that's just like a glitch. It's like you put them on and
That's awesome. I love like there's lots of good music from Japan that I've just started finding out.
Yeah. Zach, I suspected that I was maybe going to bring it up today, but but I don't know if we'll have time. We can get into it if we want. But while I was playing Nier Automata, I was listening to some of this, like, I don't know what the genre is called. It's like, I don't know if you call it like webcore. It's like it's like anime / death metal aesthetic. And
okay,
that sounds awesome.
I want to hear that.
Yeah, me too, actually.
It's like lasers shooting through water and sea monsters screaming up from it all. It's like the weirdest, craziest, most immersive thing I've ever heard. And while I was playing Nier and I was reading this book by China Mieville, who writes weird fiction and, characters who are talking squids and whatever, I was just like, I'm a little bit in too deep right now. So I haven't played Nier in a little while because of it, because I was actually like, it felt almost dissociative.
I've always been,
especially that game.
Yeah.
I've always been curious about how, like, because I have the attention span of a goldfish, right? So I've always been curious about how people can listen to music and be able to split their concentration down the middle and work on other things like writing, for example. I feel like when I discovered like lo-fi music, just like lo-fi instrumental, that is really the only type of music that can center me if I'm working on writing, be it for work or for the podcast, really for anything, or if it's just something to concentrate. Because I've tried to listen to just whatever, and because I'm a musician too, so I just find myself now focusing on the drums, for example, or listening to the lyrics. And so I think that's actually really impressive that you can listen to this and use that as your way of being able to write and actually be able to feel that creativity.
Well, I feel the same thing a lot of the time, which is why I sometimes opt for music with indecipherable lyrics and, drawn out screams. It really kind of just depends what's required of that writing session. But totally same. I mean, there are times where I'll be writing and I'm going to like, oh, you know what? I'm going to get in a classical mood, right? I don't need any lyrics. I don't need, any of that percussion. And I'm just going to put on Mozart, and like 5 minutes later, I'll be like, Mozart sucks. I can't write to Mozart. and now I'm like, I got to put on Interpol and just like
hell yeah,
jam out while I'm, while I get a page written. So it's never a sure thing.
See, Interpol's damaging for me because then I'm going to be listening to, if it's for the first 3 albums, then I'm just going to be listening to the bass licks. And
that's what I'm saying. Right. And then I'm trying to figure them out on my guitar, and then it's lunch, and then the morning's over, and the day is shot, and I'm not a writer anymore. And,
what happened?
When you were just with writing in general, and just going back to like writer's block, do you typically just kind of throw notes and an outline down, just sort of a loose structure of what a chapter will entail before you then go and flesh it out?
Never. It was great to talk to you guys. No, I'm not a big outliner. I think it's just kind of the way my brain doesn't work. And with screenwriting, you have to outline, I think, because it's such a like, okay, here we've got, 5 pages with the main character talking to the romantic lead, and that's as much time as we have for it right now. And so you have to outline the beats of that scene. Whereas I found with fiction, especially with early drafts, I need more space. I need more room to improvise, and it'll become clear to me what needs to happen. And then I'll, write the notes here a little bit. Why do we need this? Let's move this earlier. But that sort of outlining process is, I don't know, whatever the opposite of architectural is. I mean, it is really like on the fly with me.
Nice. Okay. I used to write back when I was much, much younger. And it was really just, I would like to say my works were original, but they were just ripoffs of really great science fiction pieces.
Yeah.
But it's something I really want to, like, I've thought about wanting to get back into it. But the approach I've always thought is like, maybe I can't, like, maybe I have to sit here and outline things, because I used to take a similar approach to you. I would just kind of just throw it all down, whatever I was thinking, just throw it down on a piece of paper. And I personally found that was a surefire way to hit a block. So I don't know if it's like worthwhile to experiment, or if it really is just a find what works best for you sort of scenario.
It is. And I think that that's why it takes writers such a long time to, find a style and a voice and a process, and why it's an ongoing, quest. I didn't want to say process twice in the same sentence. Like there's like always like self-monitoring, what did I do today that worked? What can I do tomorrow to make it work better? And for me, it's not a conscious process. This is something that has kind of developed since I started doing this seriously 8 or 10 years ago, when I decided, this is what I'm going to do every day. And it's changed book to book, the failed ones, the published one, the upcoming one. It's just, there's no two are the same. And if there's anything that I have learned from Orphans and having a work that's out there that's been thankfully well received by some people, it's that if I just keep doing it, it'll get done.
Zach, go ahead.
Yeah. Just listening to some of your process, like I remember a while back, I got given the idea that, like, for people, like making a song, like creating music, is like a lot of people likened it to gardening. And then I listened to what the process is for you as a writer, and it kind of sounds more like mountain climbing. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. Sort of, with like base camps along the way, and nice, I've made it this far and I see the top of the mountain, and today it feels a long way off because I'm super tired, but tomorrow I could swear I'm right there. It's a clear day. I see it. The weather's right. I had a good sleep. And then you make progress. And then at the end of that day, you are still so far away. The songwriting process, I play guitar, and my younger brother's a drummer. We were in bands growing up for years together. And I have always found writing music just to be so difficult. It's weird. It's a shorter form, and I somehow, because of that, don't really have the patience for it. I'm like, every instrument working together has got to like work in this really confined space. There's nowhere to hide really in a song. It can change in a minute, and it's bad, and then it's skip and you never listen again.
That's why you have to be a bassist. That's the only way you can hide. You can hide if you're a bassist.
I've always dreamed of being a bassist, but my ego kept me as a frontman. I just, it's the process of writing a book is a little easier for me somehow, because I feel like I can hide on a day a little bit. I can sort of wait it out, wait for the book to make the first move a little bit. And then when I see it go, I can kind of jump on it. I didn't answer the question earlier about how I know I'm done, because I don't really.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm struggling with the most, is just like that feeling of like, first of all, finding the ending, but then also the mistake of going back and rereading what you've written, and then just being like, this is not like, I've evolved since, I'm like in a different place, so this isn't resonating with me the same way that it was when I wrote it. So it's like rewrite, and then it never comes out, and then you die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're dead.
Yep.
Something that I just read Bird by Anne Lamott for the first time, and it's wonderful. And I suggested, and if your listeners are writers, I recommend it to them, just to have next to them when they're in a moment of creative need. And one of her pieces of advice, and they're all good pieces of advice, is to just finish things, no matter what length. Just finish it and get used to finishing things. You got to let some time pass before you read your work. You don't want to let too much time pass because of exactly what you're saying, Nate. Like, if I wait so long that my Ira Glass, I think it is, has this thing about taste and ability, where the good ones start off with really good taste, but their ability isn't there yet. And a lot of people fall off when they say, you know what, my talents will never match my taste, so they quit. But if you stay with it, your talent will eventually catch up to your taste, and then you're good to go. So you got to act a little bit quick. You got to be a little bit patient. I mean, Orphans took 3 years of actual writing time. Who knows how much of a gestation period there was before that. But, when I read it and I enjoyed it and said that makes sense, there was never a moment where I was pulled out of the world where I said, I don't believe you, author, novelist, you show off dickhead who took up 400 pages of my life. When there weren't any of those moments, I knew I was okay.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I really do.
Yeah. Because then you got to fucking move on. You got something else to write. I was like, I know what the next book I want to write is, and I want to get to it, and I could, edit this thing until I die. But then
I had a friend suggest like similar, but like along the lines of, you write a book and you're writing it, and you, like, in the back of your head, you're like, what if this doesn't work? And like, it gets you like stuck in this really dark place of like, you really want like it to get out there, because, spending all that time, you said you spent like 3 years, like spending all that time and then putting out the work is such a daunting task. I can imagine, because I used to create YouTube videos, and I would spend like a week making a video, and it would be so daunting to just put the video out. So I can't imagine like what it's like spending that much time. Well, I can, because I'm on my 5th year of this book. I've said for 5 years that this book is going to come out, and it's one of those things where I'm like, it has to be perfect. But then somebody told me it doesn't have to be perfect. If it's not perfect, the next one will be.
Well, that's encouraging, and I hope they're right. I somehow don't think that whatever I write next is going to be perfect. But again, like, I don't know, for me, that my process is about trying to achieve perfection. This book is out there, and I know it's not perfect, and yet it's done. It's not mine anymore. It's now the reader's. It was mine when I was writing it, and now the loop gets closed when Zach picks it up. Like, that's where it lives now. It's now in that space in someone else's hands. It's not in my hands anymore. It's now up to other people's interpretation of it, whether they connect and love it, whether they are annoyed by it and don't believe it. This is, I don't want it to sound any kind of way, but like I was waiting for my first review to come out and I was so anxious, and I knew it was going to drop any day. And I wrote in my journal, like, I'll accept whatever happens. This is the first time I'm ever getting an editorial review. I was freaked out and I was like, it's not mine anymore. It's going to find love in places and hate in places. It's a child. It's like another person going out to live its own life and find its own place in the world. And that really, you know, I could publicize and market and, you know, annoy people all I want. But it's not really up to me. How Herman Melville funded the publishing of Moby Dick himself. Like, it's okay, you know, like it's not up to you when people connect with it, what it does out there. And then literally an hour later, the review dropped and they loved it. So it was kind of like,
awesome. Yeah, I read the reviews and I was like, wow. And like, I looked at the statistics because I'm in the process right now of proposing my book to a publisher, because I would like to work with like editors and stuff. Like, I can't decide on things, so I need other people to do it. Like, what's the title? What's the cover? Like things like that. And I saw like it's got really good statistics. So congratulations on that. That's really cool.
Thanks. It is cool. It's nice to see. It's nice of people. And also it really, other than like, you know, a quick hit of joy, it does nothing in here. it doesn't at all. I worry. I doubt it. You know, the people who don't like it are so much louder than the people who do. So then you try to ignore it. And it just, that's why perfection isn't my goal. I don't find it possible for a work of fiction where it's just so capacious, like as a life, you know, like there is just so much going on. And, you know, I've read that book that I wrote, you know, God knows how many times, but other people are going to read it once and they'll miss maybe half of what I was going for, and they'll like it. It won't be special to them in the way it was special to me, or they'll pick up on something that I didn't even intend and it's special to them in a totally different way. So
that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. And so that's kind of why, to me, perfection is sort of beside the point.
I wish I had that.
I've always looked at it as if like one person can find enjoyment in it, then it's all worth it.
Then it's a win. Yeah, it's a win.
Yeah,
like, I don't know if this is just my Zenist bullshit talking, but like for me, I've always kind of seen this as like if perfection truly is something that exists, it's not going to be something that we can behold the way that we think we can. So to me, when something is just like happens the way that it happens, to me that is already perfect, because you know there's nothing you can really do to take away from whatever is ultimately there in that moment, because you know that's the part of it that kind of stays the way that it is. So for me, when I look at it, that concept of perfection from that angle, I don't ever feel intimidated. I always feel like regardless of what I do, it's going to be exactly what it needs to be.
That's fair.
Well, yeah.
You guys are lucky you don't have OCD.
Yeah.
Because that's where I'm at. But the insight is super appreciated, and it will come out. And you know, I think the best advice would just be you just do it because you love it. You know, like I've written stuff before where I used it as like an escape. Like it was just like, you know, that's where I went. That was like my place to go. Yeah. I was curious if you ever did something like that while you were writing this.
I think that's kind of the point of the writing life, is to just like, I feel worse when I don't write. I have to, get it out. It's
Yeah,
gotta
yeah.
go
You have to
somewhere,
go there. You have to go there and visit.
Yeah. And like, this might sound, juvenile and idealistic, but like, we get one life. But if I write a bunch of stuff, well, gosh, how exciting is that? Like, how many lives can I kind of explore and, less, synthesize than rather than understand. Like, I don't find myself in the business of like making shit up when I write. It's like I said, make myself available to understanding what it might be like for a kid who can't feel pain growing up in a post-environmental world, trying to help his friend out who he doesn't, know what she's going through. Like, that to me is okay. Now we've got two people. One of them's having a good time. One of them's having a bad time.
Got that contrast. Yeah.
Or are they gonna like coexist? Zach, you mentioned like perfection kind of being something that's already there. You put it beautifully. I don't need to touch it, but it made me think of like what made me want to write this book. There were a lot of moments that felt perfect on that trip. And not because of anything that I did. There was in just outside of Portland, I was told you got to go to the Columbia River Gorge, and I put it in my GPS and I drove for like an hour and a half. And when it said I arrived, there was no gorge in sight. There was like sort of like a farmhouse set way back, and I was in the middle of like a misty mountain on the highway. Like, this can't be it. Like, they told me I had to come here. I'm at a drop point on a GPS because it didn't understand that I was trying to get to a trailhead.
Oh, geez.
So I had to double back. And while I'm driving back, I saw one. I was like, I got to get out and pee. So I'm going to stop and go use the bathroom. And when I did, I saw some people walking up the trail, and it had been raining earlier, and I heard it, I heard this whooshing sound. So I followed it, and a mile and a half later, I'm looking at a waterfall, like a real waterfall, like a 60 or 100
Oh,
foot
that's awesome.
waterfall that I could hike behind in this little cave. And I'm sitting there, like sitting on this rock, looking out from the inside of a waterfall over, like rainforest,
That's awesome.
And I was like, that's perfect.
Nice.
That's perfect. And it was an accident. And there's poetry in a book that I have somewhere that I wrote while sitting there. And the poem will never see the light of day. And it's total shit. And it, doesn't capture anything that I saw or felt in that moment. And yet I know what it is. I know when it happened. And that was as good as it gets,
When you were on that road trip, did you pass through the Redwood Forest, the Avenue of the Giants?
So the way that I went, I would have had to cut way inland to go through that. It would have taken me like 10 hours on a loop out of my route. Nice. So regrettably, no. My wife and I went to Big Sur for our anniversary, and we walked through a redwood forest, and we went to Yosemite and walked through a forest of redwoods there. And those things are a perfect creation.
Mm-hmm. And that's like the best place to really be alone with your thoughts, as it were, because it is so silent in there.
Wow.
I was there a couple of years ago, and I did the trek through the Avenue of the Giants, and it's silent. Like the term, like you could hear a pin drop. You really can. It is just, it's natural soundproofing. And I think for anyone that's looking for inspiration, that's the place to do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's two ways that goes, I guess, but when you're in the right space, like real silence is beautiful. And it's almost, I don't know, Jack, because I haven't been in like the anechoic chambers. I don't know, like if you guys have.
Oh yeah, I've wanted to so bad. That sounds
I've wanted to do that too. Yeah,
the quietest room on earth. People go crazy.
Yeah.
It's like
hear the blood in your ear.
Yeah, so like I get freaked out when I hear my heartbeat when I'm like on my pillow. I'm like,
Me
I gotta pull out you too. Yeah,
Yeah. Like I'm gonna die.
Exactly. So I can imagine that silence and how calming it can be when it hits right. There's no end to how much that trip influenced this book. I got on the mountains in Lake Tahoe when I've broken my arm twice snowboarding, but I got on a board and the skiers were going one way and they all had their poles so they could go on the catwalk. But as a snowboarder, I had nothing to like keep me going. So I had to go down a hill and then meet them over. So I cut through a trail. And when I got off the trail and into the woods, everything turned blue. The sun was it was like in shadow from these trees and it was silent. And all I heard and felt was like the wind and my board taking me through this little wood. And I was like, whoa, this is like gravity, snow, and the slope of a mountain, like carrying my body along. Like that to me was like the most silent moment of my life.
Nice.
Like the snow.
That sounds cathartic.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then all my hockey teammates got down on the other side and they're like, "Me, where the fuck were you?" And I'm like,
I was busy.
Spiritual experience.
I was somewhere else.
My last question for you, Dan, just throwing it back a little bit when we're talking about music that we're listening to while we're working, trying to be creative. What is your favorite Interpol album?
Oh gosh. I go back and forth between the first two. Turn on the Bright Lights, I think, is just I don't think anything was like that before, I mean, that really was like a new, and I wasn't around when it came out. I mean, I was alive, but I wasn't like, I didn't have my Walkman and like dying for the Interpol record. I was just kind of like, the first time I heard it and that guitar comes through, that little riff at the beginning, that tingly, and then the bass comes in, I was like, this is not normal, and I think that sustains through the record. But what's the second one called? Narcos? Was it
Antics.
Narcos. But I think that Antics has more like dancey sing-along cuts to it. Like Not Even Jail is one that I can just like stand up and dance and headbang to and pretend that I'm like grabbing the microphone, at the front of the stage. But I think that their first album I can always come back to as a more meditative, cohesive work of art. There's not a track on that album that I skip when I listen to it.
Nice. That is the correct answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
We also would have accepted Our Love to Admire, but
oh God. Well, now we're getting deep. And I think some of their new stuff is kind of cool. I forget the name of the single that came out last year. I just don't find their songwriting as consistent through a song as it was at the beginning. Like I'll love the chorus, but kind of be bored during the verse and just wait for the chorus to kick in again. But I mean, God, they can do no wrong. Just one record, one of those, and you know,
I'm one of those people who's like, oh, this band was never the same after one member left, and really when Carlos D left the band, and
the drummer,
what's that?
Is he the drummer?
He was the bassist. And his last album was their self-titled album in 2010, but just because he was a guitarist, so he wrote all of his bass parts like guitar riffs. And now when you listen to their more recent stuff, the bass parts just sound like bass parts, and it's not bad, but it's not his.
You listen to Television?
Yes. Yeah,
I mean, that's like Interpol is like Television, but with bass. You know. In the counterpoint melodies and you can, when I was a kid, I listened, the first album that I bought two. My dad took me to Tower Records and I said, I want Kelly Clarkson's Thankful. And he said, fine, but you've also got to buy the very best of Kiss. And I listened to it and I'm wearing a Kiss shirt. I am. And they were my first concert, and I dressed up as Gene Simmons for Halloween and all the stuff, and I loved them. But after still a couple of years of like listening to them and their greatest hits on repeat, I had to ask my dad, what does the bassist do? I didn't know.
I've had people ask me that question, and I've pointed. I'm like, all right, like if. I don't know like how to describe it, but I've been able to find like instances of songs where there's like it starts off and there's no bass and then the bass kicks in. And it's really one of those things that people just don't think about until it's not there. It's like object permanence.
Yeah, for sure. It's my dad said it's the backbone of the song, and that kind of made sense to me. It falls apart without it. It's got no spine without it. And
and people never know it's there. That's the craziest part about it.
Yeah.
Unless you're Peter Hook in New Order and you make it prominent, like you want people to know it's there, and you're playing only exclusively high notes. Yeah.
You're bringing this stuff up at the last question. My God, I see the tattoo on your forearm.
I waited. I saved the best for last, and I was curious if you're sure.
What are we talking about? Joy Division.
Right. I was curious about the Kiss shirt too. Now I know it's the actual Kiss shirt, but at the beginning of our chat here, I'm thinking to myself, okay, is that Kiss or is it that shirt that has a picture of the members of Kiss on it and underneath it says Led Zeppelin?
Oh, that's
because that does exist, and it's one of my favorite shirts.
That's fun.
It's the shirt with the picture of a baseball on it, and underneath it says football.
Yes, I had that one. Yeah, mine said touchdown on it.
I had a shirt that was Che Guevara and it said Kurt Cobain.
Oh my
God. and the funny thing is I had a math tutor in college who was he spoke to me. He was like, and I just want to let you know that is a beautiful picture of Che Guevara. And I was like, oh yeah. So I like scooched down so that he couldn't see that it said Kurt Cobain. I was like, I'm gonna die today.
You had to turn it into a crop top.
Yeah.
Favorite Che Guevara crop top.
Yeah.
So what this means is we need to do another interview where we only just talk about music.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
Maybe hockey.
That too.
Oh yeah, because like I was like it's a very interesting combination of tastes, but that's also why I suggested Nier Automata to you, because like I felt like you were gonna like get immersed in it the same way that I did.
Yeah. There's a lot we could go into. I have a strange relationship with video games. I can't let myself go there because I will get addicted and get anything done. You know what I mean?
And now
I have a strange relationship with fun. You know, I try not to let myself have any.
So that your writing is your fun zone. I'm the same exact way. I'm like, I put off getting Tears of the Kingdom because I was like, if I get that, then that's going to be my source of fun, and then writing will be work.
Yeah, right.
It just means we'll have to have a part 3 of this interview
Oh,
where
I
we're going to
love
talk
it.
about video games.
Yeah.
Zach, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Just that, like, I'm glad that you were able to join us for this. It was a very insightful conversation. Like that's like I remember one of the I think first initial conversations I had with you is just like I always find like the way that people think and perceive very interesting, and like that in particular when it comes to writers' brains, like I liken writers' brains similarly to like people who make puzzles and like can like or like make mazes and stuff, because it's like game masters and things like that. Like it's very interesting how like when you find your medium that like you can really speak towards, it just makes your niche like way more interesting.
No, there's nothing better than talking about something you love or listening to someone else talk about something they love and something that they feel confident doing and are good at. So thanks for indulging me and keeping me in my wheelhouse and sticking to my specialties. This was fun. You guys made me look good. So
Appreciate that.
I really appreciate it.
Nate,
Nice.
any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Yeah. What inspired you to write? I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Nate's also a comedian.
Yeah, that's what the book is.
You know what this. So one of our co-hosts, Mike, we went to a birthday gathering for him yesterday, and Nate literally hands him a note card that says gift on it, and he's like, "I got you a gift card."
I didn't have time to get a real gift, so I panicked.
This guy's hilarious.
I really panicked. I was like, I can't show up. Everyone's going to have a gift. And I'm like,
Oh my God.
It was like the last minute. Jack invited me like the day before. I didn't have time to go out to get a gift. So I just grabbed a note card because I write all of my jokes on note cards. And
He just writes gift.
so I just wrote gift and I was like, here's a gift card.
Well, now I know what I'm giving my brother for his wedding.
There you go.
Perfect. One last real question. Who's your favorite goalie?
Henrik Lundqvist.
Okay.
Nice.
He might as well have raised me. He was inducted to the Hall of Fame this week. I grew up in New York. He was the New York Rangers goaltender starting when I was 13 years old. So
Okay.
right when your obsessions get the strongest, I was like, oh my God, this is who I want to be. This is who to learn from. And then I turned 18 and got my first goalie coach. And he was like, you're trying to play like Henrik Lundqvist. You have to stop. You're not Henrik Lundqvist. Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah.
He's in the NHL. He's a Hall of Famer. I'm, a D3 athlete. So
Fair.
that was, but he always the favorite.
Nice.
Yeah.
I liked how quickly you were just like Henrik, like right there. It's not even, you didn't even have to think.
Nope.
Nice.
Nope.
It's Martin Brodeur for me, but that's just the way that his career ended was a little bit disheartening. So
A little bit of a whimper than a bang.
but
Yeah. No, I mean, he's in the conversation for the greatest of all time for a reason.
he's
My
pretty
wife
good.
got me a cameo one year from him, and
Oh
Oh
damn!
no way.
he's a great goalie. He is, he doesn't have a career in broadcasting ahead of him. Oh,
Fair. Thank you, man. I appreciate your words, your inspirations, your guidance, and I appreciate you being here.
Nate, thanks for the questions, and I can't wait to read yours when it's ready.
We'll see.
I wish you all the luck with that, man.
I appreciate it.
It's never easy, but always worth it. And, happy to talk more tactics for dealing.
Awesome.
All
I
right.
appreciate that.
His name's Daniel Vitale. You can find him at danielvitale.com. The book is called Orphans of Canland. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your books. Dan, thank you for the time. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. You guys are the best.